Welcome back to PCA's Garage. Today we're going to talk about brakes, specifically brakes for this Cayenne and how to anticipate when you're going to have to do a brake change. Now, brakes, they're known in Porsches to be among the best. Maintaining them is absolutely important. But to maintain these brakes, you need to plan for it because the parts alone is going to be well over $1,000 for pads and rotors and hardware. And then you add a couple of hours of labor on top of that. So I like to know well in advance when I'm about to have this expenditure. If you wait until the pads or the car gives you a warning on the dash, that pretty much means that your pads are at the end of its life. They have sensors built into the pads that wear away and trigger the light. When this happens, you pretty much have to go straight to the dealer and take care of it. And again, because of the cost, I like to know well in advance before that happens. Rotors wise, this is the rear rotor of a Cayenne, a used one as well as a new one. And typically you would replace maybe 2 pads to a set of rotors on a normal car. But for this Cayenne, because of its weight and because of the stopping power that's required, we recommend doing it 1 for 1. One thing you can look for, if you're not looking at a Cayenne rotor, is how much thickness has worn away from the rotor and does it measure up to the factory specs that are allowable to keep the rotors on the car. You can look to see if there's a major lip there, but really the right way is to to get a caliper gauge and measure this thickness to make sure it's within spec. This one here is a brand new one. Because we're looking at a Cayenne, that's 1 for 1. We're just going to throw in a fresh set. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look for these pads behind your wheels. Luckily with this Cayenne, we have a pretty open wheel design, so you can peek behind there and see the condition of your pad. Keep in mind, this is very worn. It's probably about 10% of its life left, whereas this one's 100%. That's a huge difference. So what you're looking for is something that might be about 25% left to give you the indication that you're going to have a brake change coming up. Now the pads sit in this fashion up against your rotor, and what you're going to do is take a simple flashlight. Hopefully you can get it in between the spokes or trying to shine onto the edge of the pad there so that you can see how much pad material is left. And that's really it. If you can see that you've got a good amount of meat there on your pad, then you're good for a while. If it's getting thin, then you know you're going to prepare for a brake change. While you're in there, what I also like to look for is to see how the pad is wearing on the rotor. And if it's nice and uniform, that's good. If it's not, then that might be an indicator of other issues. You might also want to look at to see if there is a lip forming on the edge of your rotor. And if there is, it could be that you need to do a rotor change. With the Cayenne, like I said earlier, you're going to do a 1 for 1 anyway, so it doesn't matter. But for those that you're considering keeping the rotor for a car, you might want to make sure you take a thickness gauge and measure the rotor and make sure that it's still within factory specs, and then turn the rotor so it's nice and smooth and gets rid of that edge. Then you can reuse the rotor. But that's pretty much in a nutshell how to check your pads to know whether or not you've got a brake change coming up. If you'd like to see the brake change for the Cayenne, just hit the like button somewhere around here on the screen, and if we get enough likes, we'll capture the change for the Cayenne and you see how that's done.